Right, next up, we have an exciting talk entitled Q-Day and Beyond, Building Resilience for the Quantum Age. And Rich is going to take us deep into quantum, unpack Q-Day, the point at which quantum computers can break encryption that protects pretty much everything. So please do welcome Richard and his panelists to the stage and give them a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Actually, you've come to the main event right now, so that might have been the best talk up until that point, but myself and Antony are going to turn the tables on that. So yeah, I've got the pleasure to be joined today by Antony or Tony. Like myself, I'm Richard when I'm in trouble, Rich not, but you're not in trouble today, Tony, so we'll stick with Tony. So Tony Russell, CTO from Telviva, and co-founder of Claritech. Antony is a veteran of the ICT industry, specializing in synchronicity of voice, video, and video chat. One of South Africa's few Digium certified asterisk professionals. That's probably my first question, to understand exactly what that is. But Antony balances his passion for technical innovation with representing South Africa globally as a competitive avatar. So probably first question, what is a Digium certified asterisk professional?
Digium is the founder of the product called Asterisk, which is a software PBX, and that's their certification that you would go and get to show that you are an expert in that field.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad we got that cleared up. So before we start, I just wanted to just get a bit of audience participation. So raise your hand. The question really is quantum threat or quantum hype? Raise your hand if you're in the quantum threat category. Okay, skeptics, excellent.
That's what we like. Education to do.
Yeah, we have got some education to do. So you're in the right place, even though you probably didn't realize it. I guess I can only ask the ones that raise their hand, or maybe the other ones as well. Raise your hand if you believe that quantum is not your problem, it's a future CISOs or security professionals problem. Well, couple of hands raised there. So let's get into it. So Tony, let's start with probably the best place to start is right at the beginning. We're here to talk about, and this is obviously talk about Q-Day. We're talking about post-quantum cryptography, but we can't really start there without talking about quantum computing. So really, what is quantum computing, and how does it differ from classical computing?
I think everybody's probably heard the first part of the explanation. If you take a classical computer, you put classical bits in the computer. Those bits can be 0 or they can be 1. 1 bit, 1 piece of information, 2 bits, 2 pieces of information, so on and so on. In a quantum computer, we've got quantum bits, qubits, and each of those qubits can be either 1 or 0. So 1 bit, you've actually got potentially 2 pieces of information. 2 bits, you've got potentially 4 pieces of information. And then now you have a situation whereby the power of the system exponentially increases with the number of bits there. Now, these bits are not carriers of information as we know it. They're not 1s, they're not 0s. They're in this mystical thing called superposition. And we connect them together with gates. In the same way as we connect our classical computers, our bits together with AND gates and OR gates and NOT gates to create adders and multipliers, we have to connect the quantum bits together with quantum gates that goes ahead and makes them work together. Quantum computing works on the quantum level. I'm going to stay away from the double slit experiment and all those sort of things there. But what a quantum bit is doing is defined by a wave function. So we have to come up with a quantum algorithm that uses the wave functions of the bits that are connected together to make them all synchronize and point at the solution. I think that is the best explanation I can do of a quantum, of how a quantum computer works. It's very, very different to a classical computer.
It is. I'm pretty sure when you said quantum realm, most people were thinking Ant-Man, for anyone that's a Marvel fan, and getting down to that level. And you sort of mentioned creating those quantum algorithms, and we'll get on to probably the one or the two that are probably the most concern. But there's also challenges. There's a big talk about having that understanding. We talk about AI through a lot of it today and how we've got to keep up. I think there's going to have to be a huge jump when quantum computers become an everyday thing. But the question is, are they going to become an everyday thing? I think there's challenges around quantum computing because it's not something we expect to see on someone's desk.
No, and quantum computing has been 5 years away for the last 20, 30 years, right? So it's somebody else's problem. It has been somebody else's problem for. And in exactly the same way as we have been pointing at recent events in the AI field with Mythos coming out, exactly the same sort of thing is happening in the quantum world. Late March, Google published a paper pointing out that they can now go ahead and do the bad thing that we're going to talk about, do the encryption breaking with much, much less resource. Fewer quantum bits are needed. Fewer of these gates are now needed. There's even a possibility of being able to do it not at cryogenic temperatures. One of the big problems with a quantum computer is you've got to keep it at absolute zero. It makes it difficult to put in your backpack and take it out for a quick hack with you. Google have, as a consequence of this paper, they've had to turn around and said internally they are switching their Q day now to 2029. So we're now saying that Google feel that they are only going to be safe if they have fixed this problem within 3 years.
Which I think is absolutely I say amazing, astounding. Obviously, I've run this session, each one of ours, and had different guests. We've got lots of different perspectives. But actually, if I go back to the very first one we ran, which was the end of February, we were looking at that Q day and saying, well, do you know what, actually, potentially still 10 to 12 years, but getting closer, being squeezed from both ends. But now Google has suddenly, only less than a month ago, said, actually, do you know what, we're at that position that we now need to be thinking only 3 years into the future.
I think it's more they're saying that you're not going to have to wait. Well, what the fancy word is the sufficiently powerful, cryptographically relevant quantum computer. I mean, the definition of that is changing. Everybody was thinking we're talking about thousands and thousands of qubits that need to be working in perfect harmony with many of these gates, and they're saying no. We've done the research and we've brought these things down. I mean, we're going to talk about Shor's algorithm.
Well, let's jump into it.
That's mid-90s.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, Shor's algorithm is Peter Shor turned around, thought about how am I going to go ahead and solve this problem of factoring large prime numbers. He went into the frequency manipulation world. He went and took the Fourier transformation and created a quantum version of the Fourier transformation. So I'm trying to tie this now back to what I was saying about how a quantum computer works. Our quantum computers, we're not going to go and type in a key and say, oh, now mathematically give me the prime numbers that make up this key. It's going ahead and it has to go and something with a frequency and something to do with a wavelength and the numbers will magically appear. I know that sounds weird. I watched a video in preparation for this one here. So it was a lovely video, and the presenter had a screen behind with thousands and thousands of numbers, and they're blinking in and blinking out and blinking in, and then suddenly the answer appears. That is the way that a Google presenter is explaining how that's going to go ahead and work. So but in the mid-90s, Peter Shor was thinking about how we're going to go ahead and do things, and now Google is working on how to improve or how to implement his algorithm in a much, much better way.
Yeah. So let's take that a bit further, and we're talking about that ability to factor large prime numbers. What is the impact of that for us? Just to kind of really lay it out and go, actually, what is the threat? Why are we sat here not just talking about how amazing quantum computers are, or potentially could be, but actually the threat that we actually face from them?
So our public-private key encryption systems, they work basically on the theory that it is very, very hard to factor a large number into its prime factors. Your private key is essentially a large prime number, if you think of it that way. So your public key has that private key as a factor in there. Now, for a classical computer to go ahead and determine the prime factor of that public key, tens of thousands of years is the estimate on that thing, even if it can be done. With Shor's algorithm, implemented correctly on a on a sufficiently, well, I won't say the long thing again, on a sufficiently powerful computer, they're estimating that can be done in about 10 minutes. So that means that our private key, public key encryption schemes that we use for a lot of different things are at risk. Now, so what is the risk? We sort of sit today and say, well, we don't have a sufficiently powerful computer. There aren't people running around with backpacks and cryogenic plants in their pockets and doing that. So why should I be worried about that? Well, we have this lovely thing called harvest now and decrypt later. In your capital city, London, the Chinese are wanting to open a new embassy in the middle of London. That embassy just happens to have its basement about, I think they've worked out 0.5 meter away from a whole swath of fiber optic cables that carries probably all the financial traffic and all the government traffic and whatever there. Why would they be interested in building that thing there? So they want to go ahead and listen. People want to go ahead and listen to the secrets that we're talking to each other. They can't understand them now, but they're going to put them on a nice large hard drive, buy some disk space from Google and from AWS. And when this happens, which could be as early as 2029, they can now start going ahead and decrypting those things and finding other secrets. Yeah. So for like a government, names of spies and things like that, that might be a problem for that government.
Yeah.
But secondly, once Q-Day has come, your public-private key encryption becomes worthless. What do we use that for? Well, most notably an HTTPS site. So you go and put www.aws.co.za in there, and Amazon Web Services comes up. How do you know that that is now Amazon Web Services? Because in 10 minutes, someone can take that certificate, they can work out the public key, they can print a new certificate, put a copy of AWS up there, and you would not know the difference between that. So I think that comes down to the concept of trust. How are we going to trust that those sites out there are what they say they're going to be? AWS is just an interesting example. I think I probably meant to say something like Amazon, where you buy stuff. Banks.
Well, you buy compute.
Yeah, you buy compute. But banks, all those places that you go ahead and trust. And then not just you transacting out there, business-to-business transactions as well. So how could you be sure that a bank transfer that you have made from your bank to to the company's bank or something like that has actually gone through correctly?
Yeah, and I've spoken to a lot of, because it's a hot topic in the finance world, because I think they're the ones that are sort of looking at it going, actually, we could be hugely impacted by it. A lot down to banking apps and internet banking, and if people suddenly can't trust their transfers, the apocalyptic scenario that they are preparing for and need to get ahead of what's driving it is the expectation that if that happens, do we get a run on the banks? Is there enough hard cash, which there definitely isn't, and creating that scenario. So that's actually really driving, and particularly in Europe. And I think one of the real interesting things is that the banking sector in Europe have set out their stall for the stages of readiness, and based on what's happened and been released by Google towards the end of March, completely obliterates that entire plan that they had to try and put that together. Yeah. So just before we jump on to getting into, I guess, what do we need to do about it? It's not just one of those other things. Talk about banking. What other major financial technology is underpinned by encryption? And that's Bitcoin.
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess a quick question. Well, do we need to sell it off quick?
Oh, of course. In fact, the paper that Google was published was actually focused specifically on the elliptic curve encryption used in Bitcoin. The actual analysis and was done on how Bitcoin chains can be attacked by a sufficiently powerful quantum computer. And they were looking at things like, are we now able to go ahead and intercept the transaction from you pushing the button on your computer, and the time that it hits the Bitcoin, you can get that information, and before the the authentication or the checksum is written, can we decode that and jump in? And they think that that's possible to actually go at spend time, go ahead and hijack that transaction and take that money, take that Bitcoin to yourself.
And I'm pretty sure, and one of those weak wallets is Satoshi's famous wallet. So I look forward to somebody opening up that at some point.
Well, that's protected by a key, right?
Yeah.
So that key is somewhere in the Bitcoin chain. So someone can potentially go and find it, decrypt it, and have it.
Yeah. So there's a get-rich-quick scheme. Very rich, actually. So look, we've talked about it, how great it is, the pitfalls. Let's talk about actually what do we need to start doing about it. Because I think one of the things we've talked about, I'm sure many people have sat back thinking, oh, wow, actually hadn't really considered that. Also, it's not tangible. There's nothing that that you can show that it's happening right now. So it's all to a certain extent theoretical. Appreciate that actually that has kind of been proven. So I guess there's a couple of parts, and maybe we'll break them down about what we need to do with it, because I think there's the approach, there's the process, there's the approach, there's communication, there's technology as well. I think it's important that we start to unpick some of that and get to a point of, well, actually, what should we be doing? So if we start with, what is the approach that we should start to take now?
Well, I mean, I've been thinking, for a talk like this, I mean, everybody else has gone with 3 things to take away from there. So I've got my 3 things to take away. I think education is probably the first thing. I mean, and from the poll that you took a little bit earlier, I don't think there's huge numbers of people in this audience who are worried about this. I think a level of worry needs to be done that. And I think the level of worry is sitting in the security department at the moment, which it shouldn't be, right? We spoke about it being trust. So the risk department needs to be part of that. I had some opportunities to rehearse this a little bit inside my company. We pulled the CEO in at some point, and we gave him the talk, and he sort of went away thinking a bit carefully and came back for the next one to ask his questions. So I think educating as a senior management, taking it to the board level, making sure, because of step 2, and then success step 2 is actually going ahead and making those plans to go ahead and do something about it. So the couple of things that we didn't actually cover is the fact that this encryption problem is solved, right? So NIST have developed 4 algorithms that are post-quantum that can be used to replace your SHA and your RSA and all those different algorithms that we're currently using today. They can be put in place, but they're more complicated, right? We've got to find a task that is more difficult than factoring primes that a quantum computer is not going to be able to do in a reasonable amount of time. So these algorithms have been thought about, they have been tested, they've been researched, and about 4 years ago, NIST went ahead and published them. But we find that they take more compute power. So you need more compute power to go ahead and now encrypt using a post-quantum algorithm. They're bigger. The keys are bigger. I mean, your key at the moment, your little file that you keep your key in is about 200 bytes, 256 bytes or something like that. Post-quantum key, they're about 1,000 bytes, maybe 1,200 bytes. So you're into a 6-7 times multiplier on that one there. And then the actual package that you're sending is larger. The checksums that need to go with it are larger. So you now need more bandwidth to go ahead and over that one there. So if you are an organization that is depending a lot on encryption, and you're sending and receiving a lot of encrypted traffic, you may need to increase the compute power of the machines that are encrypting it. You may need to go ahead and increase the power of the routers that are routing those packets, because they've now got more work to do. You may need to increase the bandwidth of your links to go ahead and deal with that one. And that is going to need the board approval that we spoke about. So it's very, very good that the board is educated as early as possible. So the second thing is we looked a little bit to some of the legislation that's out there. You guys in Europe have this thing called DORA. They put an onus on you to be cryptographically aware, cryptographically agile, I think agile, I think is the term that's in there. And they talk about this cryptographic bill of materials. So I think that's a good place to go ahead and start, but also it's a good place to go ahead and get lost. So you want to go ahead and start seeing where you are using this sort of cryptography, and where it's being impacted, and what you might need to go ahead and do to fix it.
Yeah, and I know we're on 2 and there's a third one to come, but it'd be good to actually just get a quick show of hands. Who can say confidently they know where all their cryptographic assets are in their organisation?
And it's not just the assets, it's not where the stored stuff is. I mean, we didn't yet touch on that one there. At the moment, Grover's algorithm, which was the other one we didn't actually touch on, it allows you to go ahead and more rapidly break down symmetric keys, but not significantly. So your symmetric keys, if you encrypted stuff and stuck it on a disk in AWS or something, that is actually not a risk really for post-quantum. They'll get it in 10,000 years rather than 100,000 years. So that's not too bad. But it's the stuff that's in transit. So it's not just where it sits, because it's in transit. Where are the endpoints? Who are the vendors that you're talking to? What are the programs that are actually moving it around? I mean, I know very little about banking stuff, but I mean, if you've got a nice 20,000 line COBOL program that is doing your encryption for you, you've got a big task ahead of you to go ahead and rewrite that one to use a post-quantum
and that's part of that cryptographic agility. Because you say that NIST released the 4 algorithms. It started from a much larger list that eventually they narrowed down to say, these are the ones that we think are going to survive. And the point is that it is going to be a think. There's a good chance we're going to need to change those algorithms.
Yes.
And the knock-on effect there is, we need to be in a position, and we should be guiding our dev teams to think about, well, actually, we need modularity when it comes to encryption, because we need to be able to swap them in and out. And obviously, being Shaw's algorithm we're concerned about, much easier because it's that instant transfer.
Yes.
Obviously, when we get onto Grover's and that becomes something we need to be concerned about, we're going to have to re-encrypt data. That's a much, much bigger task.
I mean, exactly the same way as Peter Shaw sat down and found some quantum way to think about factoring prime numbers, someone may sit down at some day and decide, okay, this is a quantum way to go ahead and do lattice calculations, which is what's used for these new keys.
Yeah.
It's just someone hasn't thought of it yet. And there's the AI part of it, right? Using AI to go ahead and think of these algorithms. Google is involved with the X Foundation with a $4 million prize for new and innovative algorithms, quantum algorithms, because these things are so difficult to come up with. So there's a bounty on working out how to do some stuff that is quantum.
Yeah, and probably similar to the HackerOne bug bounty, we'll see the expose of the quantum world. So I'll tell you what, I jumped in there when you're number 3. Number 2, number 3.
1, 2, 3. Number 3. So number 2 was basically get your cryptographic bill of materials into there, but don't get paralyzed by it. And then number 3 is get started. I then thought it would be responsible if I sat down with my team and asked them about whether they'd thought about post-quantum cryptography. They obviously haven't. So we're getting started on our side. We've contacted several of the vendors of things like that. Just one very interesting example. I mean, can you get an SSL certificate with a post-quantum cryptographic algorithm inside it? Our vendor couldn't. So these are some of the problems that have to go ahead and be solved. And then combining that with other cryptographic agility type things, I'm not sure if people are aware that your SSL certificate lifetime is reducing. Right? So as of middle, I think, January this year, SSL certificates will be no longer than 180 days. Well, 190 something days with whatever. So I don't know if you guys are a little bit like we are. We've got a once a year, what would you call it? Process, not a process. It's like an homage, or like a whatever, whereby we have to change all the certificates on all the servers because they're all sort of manually put there. In 2029. Those certificates are going to be valid for 30 days. So if you don't have an automatic process to go ahead and do that, you will need that then.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're talking about, being able to change those algorithms as quantum cryptography goes ahead and takes off is the fact that you might need to be able to go change these things at a very, very short notice.
Yeah, and I see that as being a renaissance of certificate management platforms. I think
yes.
They're there in banking, but didn't really go much beyond outside of that, and something that we'll pick up.
But get something done.
Yes.
Yeah? Find a new encryption protocol, implement it on a test system, see how much bigger it is, see how it works with your data, and go and get some stuff done so that you are going to be ready. Because if Q-Day comes in 3 years, as Google now starts to think, we could all be in a little bit of a cryptographic trouble.
We might do. And I think we're pretty much up on time there. The last thing, I guess the takeaways for me is exactly what Tony said there, that we need to start getting cracking on it. And there is so much to do, but at the very, very least, start trying to map out where your critical and high priority cryptographic assets are. And by cryptographic assets, we're talking about the certificates that we need to go thinking about how we secure them. And the last thing I'd just say is, we've sat here and we've talked about post-quantum computing, but actually this isn't a post-quantum computing problem. This is a cryptographic problem. And actually, we've already had that, and it's just taking that on to the very next level. So thank you very much, Tony. I think we could have sat up here and talked for another half an hour easily on this subject.
We did.
And thank you to everyone else. I hope we didn't scare you too much. All right. Cheers.
Okay.